What do Bonneville, Colorado, Yellowstone, and Bear River all have in common? If you guessed that they are all of Utah's native cutthroat trout species, you'd be right. Now, if you like a challenge and you think you could catch all 4 of them in their native ranges in Utah, you'd be a perfect candidate for the Utah Cutthroat Slam. This is Wild, a Utah Division of Wildlife Resources podcast. I'm your host, Faith Heaton Jolly, and this is episode 20, Utah Cutthroat Slam. Welcome back to Wilds. I have with me this afternoon a couple of great people just hanging out here chatting with me. We have Paul Thompson. He is the Assistant Habitat Section Chief for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. And then we have Brett Prettyman with Trout Unlimited. And I'm going to make him give his title because it's like 50 words long.
Trout Unlimited works. Communications Director for several different programs for Trout Unlimited National.
Okay, awesome. He's a big deal, so he gets more words in his title. I wanted to have you guys on today specifically to talk about the Utah Cutthroat Slam. Some of our listeners may not be super familiar with that, but it's an awesome, awesome program. First, let's have you guys actually talk about what you do for your respective agencies, just so people kind of know where you're coming from and some of your background and experience.
Oh, that sounds good. I can start. So my name is Paul Thompson. I've been with the Division of Wildlife, or DNR, for 26 and change, so for quite a bit of my professional career. But I've been working on native species for most of my career, and that even started when I was in graduate school. And I went to the University of Wyoming, and I did a project in the Wyoming range on Colorado River cutthroat trout conservation, and that's really where I got my start with native species conservation and really loving native cutthroat trout. So from there, I graduated and came to work for the Division of Wildlife, and I spent most of my time in Ogden as a fisheries biologist and even the aquatics manager. Went to DNR for a few years in administration, but now I'm back with the Division of Wildlife in the Habitat section, and excited to be with my good friend Brett Prettyman, talking about the things that we love most, the native cutthroat in Utah.
Yeah, and how about you, Brett?
Well, I've been with Trout Unlimited now for 6 years, based out of Salt Lake here. And before that, I was at the Salt Lake Tribune as the outdoors editor and environmental writer for about 25 years. And I was known to poke the Division of Wildlife a couple of times during my years at the Tribune of saying, why aren't we doing something like Wyoming's Cut Slam in Utah? And I was really thankful and honored when Greg Sheehan said, well, you've been kind of bugging us about it, now you can help us make it happen. And I was really thrilled for the opportunity to do that. It fit really well into the Trout Unlimited mission of, protecting cold water species, native species, and it's been a lot of fun to be able to be a part of it. It's not something I could have done at the Tribune.
I love that. That's awesome. He's like, stop harassing us and you be in charge of it.
That's
Just
exactly
do it.
Right. Be careful what you ask for, right?
Right.
On the inside, I had been harassing them as well, because after doing my work in Wyoming, that's where the slam started initially in the West, was the Wyoming Cutthroat Trout Slam.
Okay.
And the individual I was working with, Ron Remick, out of the Pinedale office, he was the fisheries manager there in western Wyoming, developed that Cutthroat Trout Slam for Wyoming. So once I got to Utah, I've been pushing from the inside, but it took, I think, the two of us together to kind of get over that hump and get this thing off the ground.
I love it.
That's the story I love is Ron Remick and the tribute that you're paying to him from doing the slam. That just makes it even more special to me.
Yeah, he was a great biologist in the West, did so much for native cutthroat trout, and his life was taken a little short due to cancer. So,
oh, dang it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was about to say, but it's cool that you guys have partnerships and these kind of things have really built this program. So yeah, on that note, just kind of give us an overview, if you wouldn't mind, Brett, on just what the Utah Cutthroat Slam is.
Well, at its core, it's just another reason to go fishing. That's the way I really just look at it that way in many ways. But it's also an opportunity for the state and Trout Unlimited to talk about the value of native species. And a lot of people don't understand that the only native sport fish to Utah was cutthroat trout when the pioneers arrived in And there were 4 species of them here, and they're in very different, unique drainages, and people it's just the cutthroat. I'm not even sure how to describe it. It's just this, I call it cutthroat country. And every drainage is marked with these different subspecies. And it's fascinating to really sit down and look at it. And it's pretty easy once you study a little bit. And it's just linked by drainage. Bear River, Colorado, Yellowstone, which ties into the Snake, and the Bonneville, and of course Lake Bonneville and our state fish. So basically you go out, you plan a trip with family, friends, hopefully, and you get out and you try to catch these 4 species of cutthroat trout in their native range in Utah. You take a picture, you send it to the Division of Wildlife, and biologists approve it, and then we send a medallion and a registration or a certificate of completion.
And so once somebody decides to do like this fishing challenge, is there a time limit on how long they have to do it? Is there anything like that kind of regulates it?
It's that's one of the most common questions we get, and I always just like to respond, you've got your lifetime to do it. And for some people like Paul, it could be done in one day. And in
he's
others,
hardcore. He's above the rest of us.
Well, that's true. And it's just that, no, there is no time limit, and there shouldn't be. It's not something like this hardcore Red Bull, get out there and do it right now type of thing. It's like, appreciate where you're going and who you're going with, and what you're fishing for, and the places they are. That's the other thing, is we just really want to encourage people to go to places that they probably had never thought of before.
Sure. To
catch these different species. We've had one guy who's completed it 8 times, and he the first 6 he decided he was going to go somewhere different every single time for every species. And I just always admired that he had. That's what he got out of it, was this opportunity to see these new waters. And it was really exciting to me to think about that. And I'm trying to emulate that a little bit, but not so well. I have favorite spots.
You've still got your honey holes, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And so what kind of, you guys had both talked about how you both kind of pushed for this program to start. So kind of why was it started, and when was it started?
So it was started in 2016. Was the first year that we had this available. And just to add a little bit to what Brett was saying, before you go and start this challenge, sign up. You need to sign up. It's $20. $19 of that goes directly into cutthroat trout conservation. So on my end of it, working for the Division of Wildlife and spending my career working on native cutthroat trout, I'm always looking for opportunities, as Brett mentioned, to share the cutthroat story. Why are these fish unique? They're native to Utah. They're very special, and people just don't really understand how they fit into our heritage here in the state. And also, this is an opportunity to raise some money for cutthroat trout conservation. And with 19 of that $20 of the registration going into cutthroat trout conservation in the state, we've been able to do a lot of really nice little projects where we're taking barriers out and allowing fish to reconnect into spawning areas. Putting barriers in where we have non-native fish that are moving upstream that we want to exclude from those areas. Great outreach signs. So you'll see the hands from the Cutthroat Trout Slam and the funding that's been spent, your money going into this program throughout the state in all of our waters.
Totally. And I think that's one of my favorite parts, is that there is that direct tie, that like you're paying this fee to do this kind of fun, just fishing challenge is maybe what some people think of it, but really it's going toward helping conserve this species, like directly with the projects you mentioned, different things. I think that's really cool, kind of that actionable tie to that. And is that kind of why it was started, was to just have a way to fund some of these projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really started from the outreach side of things, and because the template was the Wyoming Cut Slam, and the Wyoming Cut Slam does not charge registration to do it. And I had some pretty deep discussions with Greg Sheehan, with the director of the Division of Wildlife at the time, and also our CEO at Trout Unlimited, Chris Wood, about should we charge or not. And I was kind of torn. At first I was kind of thinking, no, we shouldn't do it. But both of them told me independently, we need to make it worth it. We need to make people feel a value for it. And there wasn't much for fishermen to be able to contribute in Utah outside of buying a fishing license.
Gotcha.
And people were excited about the fishing mostly, but they liked the idea that they could contribute to conservation efforts. So we decided to charge $20, and the division was great and said we just need $1 from each registration to make it happen, and because you got to send out the medallion and the certificate, and it's been very successful. And I have to be honest, I pursued working with the Cutthroat Slam. This was the first time a national nonprofit and a state wildlife agency had combined to do something like this. And I approached Wyoming after, and I said, hey, here's what what we're doing in Utah, and would you be interested in, partnering with Trout Unlimited there? And they weren't at first, but then we eventually got to a point where we did provide the medallion for them. The Wyoming Council of Trout Unlimited did that over there. And pretty soon I kept giving them nice little updates about the money we were raising, and they're like, man, we missed the bus. We should have, because they kind of considered when we added medallions like a relaunch of the system. But they just weren't in a good place legislatively and other ways to make it happen like that. So they're pretty envious of the attention that we've been able to derive and the money that we've been able to raise for conservation through this program.
That's awesome. Well, and I was going to say, so, and kind of going into that, since you'd kind of helped launch, this initiative, kind of give us a look at some of those numbers as far as like how much money has been raised for conservation from this program.
Well, I've got to say that I don't think that even Paul and I, who were the greatest optimists about this program, could imagine how well it would do its first year, let alone, down the road.
It's maintained through the first 5 years. It's really amazing.
And last year, largely due to COVID and everybody wanted to get out, we broke the records that were set the first year. I never thought we'd get more people registered to do the slam than the first year.
That's crazy.
And last year alone, we had 787 people register. And the first year it was 672.
Wow.
So, there was a lot of interest. We also had the highest number of completions last year, which was 191 last year. The biggest year before that was 2 years before, in 2018, 142.
Oh, wow.
So, we've already got 5 this year. So the bottom line is we've raised over $57,000 for conservation efforts. And, in conservation project monies, that's not a lot. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of programs, a lot of these conservation efforts are combinations of partnerships and some money from here and some money from there, and the feds and the state and nonprofits, whatever. And there's a lot of times a little hole in the project. And the first project that we funded was like that. It was like, okay, we need this much more money to get this done. It wasn't a lot, but we provided it and it got done. Reconnected 2 miles of headwaters to a creek that's a tributary to the Weber River, and I got to see a woman who lived in the area walking by and said, "What are you guys up to?" And we told her we're putting in a fish ladder to get underneath Interstate 84. And she just kind of looked at me for a minute, and she said, "You mean there's going to be fish in this river again?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "I grew up here, and I remember 50 years ago when there were big cutthroat that would come out of the Weber."
Oh, wow.
And now I get to see him again. I'm like, I hope so. And then the following spring, there were fish up there.
That's awesome.
So that was really rewarding.
That's so cool
to have experienced that.
That stream had been severed from the Weber since 1961 when the interstate went through.
Oh.
And the very first year that we put that ladder in, we were monitoring how the fish responded, and they just shot up there and went up another mile above that and smaller that year. So it was very rewarding. And that's, these little projects, either there's a hole, but a lot of times just little projects have a hard time getting funding as well.
Sure.
And especially the outreach, the kiosks, the informational projects. And as a biologist trying to find those monies, this is a perfect pot of money to help with some of those actions too.
That's awesome. Well, and like you said, I think there is something that comes from like that ownership, right? That you individually are contributing to some of these projects that are important to you. And so I think that's kind of cool. And for me, at least, when I pay for something, I'm more invested. I'm more willing to like actually put forth the effort to complete it or participate or go or whatever. So I think that is a cool opportunity for anglers.
And I think that's what Greg and Chris recognized from the start. Like, make it worth it.
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
And we put a lot of thought into it and, tried to figure out the best ways to manage the program. And, I think we came up with a great relationship, a great partnership between Toronto Limited and the Division of Wildlife. It's gone super well. We have over 3,000 registrations.
Wow.
And over 715 completions now. We've got people from every state but 7. I think it's okay. If you have people in Delaware, Iowa, Kentucky, Maine, Mississippi, New Hampshire, North Dakota, get them here. Get them a license, get them a registration for the slam, and do it so we can get the rest of the state or the rest of the United States filled out. We have people from Canada that have registered.
That's awesome.
And it's been really exciting that way. The thing that I think Paul and I both really appreciated about it, and especially with our own children, is the family aspect. I enter every picture of every fish that's been caught for the slam on the website, and I love it when the same name is 5 or 6 in a row, and I recognize that it's a family that's got out there with their and we just had last fall we passed number 700, and right in the middle of that was a family. 14-year-old girl was number 700, and her family had done it together during COVID because it was something that they could do together.
That's awesome.
Get out of the house, get away from technology, and go catch fish.
Right. It's either binging Netflix or
That's
you're
right.
going fishing. That was pretty much all we had last year. So
Yep.
they made the right choice. Oh, that's
think
cool.
so too. And there's a lot of cases like that, and multi-generational things. I've heard a lot of stories about a dad who said, I want to take my 5-year-old, and grandpa says, oh, I want to go. And so they end up going together. And that's the other thing we see is a lot of people, once they've done the slam, their friends say, oh my gosh, you've done it. Now you can take me.
Right.
And then they say, oh, well, I might as well do it again too. And that's the other thing. You're not limited to do this once. As we mentioned, that one person's done it 8 times. And we had one person do it 7 times last year.
That's awesome.
That was a
fantastic.
bored guy.
Yeah.
But so there's no limitation to it, and it takes you wherever you wanted to go. And like I said at the start, this is just another excuse to go fishing.
That's awesome. And if you did want to do it as a family, I guess you just register each of you individually so that you each get that medallion.
And it's $10 for under 18-year-old.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, there's a reduction there for youth, and that really is, there's kids love fishing anyway, but they get a medallion, they're recognized for it. The medallion was an interesting part of it too, because we thought that we should pay attention to both sides of the medallion so that people would want to do it twice and display both sides of the medallion in a frame with their picture and their certificate.
Yep. You have to do it twice, and that's the way to display it. So I had to do mine twice right off the bat in order to get that framed. And
You
that's
gotta
what's
get
in,
it framed.
It's in my office with the fly I caught the fish on, and the certificate, and both sides of the coin.
That's awesome. I love that. I need to go look at your office now.
So I did one of my challenges in a day with one fly, just to see if I could do it. And
Oh my
so that I
gosh.
have that's the fly I have mounted within in the frame as well. It's an elk hair caddis.
Do you remember how many hours and how many miles it was?
Well, I can't remember the miles, but we camped out on Yellowstone country and had our Yellowstone, which is a lot of the fear, the one that puts fear into people. They don't know that country out in Box Elder County, and just getting out there and trying to find fish, that's where there's some hesitation. But we got that one initially right off the bat, and then I went up into the Logan River to get the Bear River. I went over into the Weber drainage and got the Bonneville, and then we went to the North Slope of the Uintas, and I got my Colorado. I think I looked at my watch, and it was 4 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So we started at 6, and I had my slam by 4 in the afternoon.
That's crazy.
I guess the one thing I'd like to say is we did that in part right off the bat to show people this isn't impossible. This isn't hard to do, because initially nobody knew we had Yellowstone cutthroat trout in the state, and we only have 6 populations. And the reason the individual Brett was talking about that's completed it 8 times, he did different streams for the first 6 slams, is because he ran out of streams to catch Yellowstone cutthroat trout in after that point. So he had to start duplicating at that after that.
Sure.
But there's great opportunities. We've restored a stream out in Yellowstone cutthroat land, Johnson Creek. It is loaded with fish. I went and fished it last year, and there was cutthroat trout everywhere in that stream. It used to be almost entirely brook trout. Now it's 100% cutthroat trout. So when you go do this challenge, there's great maps on the Cutthroat Trout Slam website. Look at those, but don't be afraid to call a division biologist either. I can't tell you how many friendships I've formed by having people call, and they have my number in their cell phone. And even when I went up to DNR, I answered every one of those calls and helped people get into the right area if they wanted to call and talk about the Cutthroat Trout Slam. And the division biologists are all there to help. So do a little homework and you'll be very successful, especially if you're going out to some of these areas like Yellowstone cutthroat trout or some of where we have the Colorado River cutthroat. Plan on a day or two, just give yourself time. Don't rush yourself. Do your homework and you'll be successful. The people that struggle and have struggled with the slam, I guess I'll just leave it at that. They just didn't leave themselves enough time and they didn't do their homework.
Gotcha.
And they said, there's no way there's cutthroat trout out there. Well, there is, and they just didn't go to the right areas. So,
And kind of segueing into that, you touched on a couple, but kind of what are the main areas for each of the 4 species? Like what are kind of some couple of streams or kind of parts of the state that people should go to for each of the species?
You can catch these fish all the way across the state. But what I like about living here in the Salt Lake area is most of them you're pretty central from where these fish are.
Okay.
So out in West Box Elder County is where we have the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. And there's 6 drainages out there that drain into the Snake River, the Raft River that drains into the Snake River system. I'm going to just throw Johnson Creek out on the table as probably the number one go-to for me because we restored it. It's got 9 to 10 miles of an abundant cutthroat trout population right now, and the fish are very willing. And then we have the Bear River fish, which again, as Brett mentioned at the beginning, you just go by drainage here. So it starts in the Uintas, flows down through Evanston, back through Rich County, and then down through Cache Valley. So you have all of the tributaries and the headwaters in the Upper Bear. You have the tributaries in Rich County, Otter Creek, Big Creek, and you also have Bear Lake and its tributaries. And then Cache Valley, probably the gem there is the Logan River, which is just, once you get up on Forest, it's just got cutthroat trout everywhere, but there's populations in the Little Bear and in the Blacksmith Fork as well.
Okay.
And then the Bonneville are found in streams that flow directly into the Bonneville Basin. So Provo, Sevier, anything from the south coming down that are coming up that comes into the Sevier or Utah Lake or Great Salt Lake. And what's really interesting and what a little twist we did, we had to go round and round on this when we put the slam together, is when we look at the genetics on these fish, the Weber River is got a mixture between the Bear River genetics and the Bonneville genetics, and that's just from where it's located. It kind of sits right in between where those fish kind of evolved separately. Right. So because it has some of both, we kind of put it in as a wild card. So you can go to the Weber and catch a cutthroat and count it as a Bear River or a Bonneville, not both. But you can count it as one or the other. So if you've, for whatever reason, got your Bear River in the Logan and you caught a cutthroat in the Weber, you could count that as your Bonneville.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the Colorado River is everything that drains into the Green River drainages. So you got the North Slope of the Uintas, the South Slope, Tavaputs, and the Boulders, anything from the south that would flow into the Colorado system.
Okay.
So those are the 4. And again, just do your homework. And this isn't hard. My family does not fish, and my wife saw that this was a passion of mine, and a couple years ago we got her signed up, and it took a little while, but we went out and she even caught him on a fly. And then last year, my daughter, who doesn't fish at all and had never fly fished, decided she wanted to try it. And we went over a 3-day weekend to start, and it took her 4.5 hours to get her Bonneville in a little stream in the Weber drainage. But when she finally caught that fish, there was no stopping her. went fishing the next day and got 2 more, and then we finished it off on the 3rd day. So within 3 days,
So cool.
she had completed her slam, and she had never caught a fish on a fly before that. So,
That's so cool.
so it's not hard. Doing your homework, that's the key, right? And people say I'm cheating because I've worked on these streams, but yeah, I know where the fish are. But if you do your homework, you know where the fish are, and they're just like any other fish, and they're a cutthroat. They love dry flies.
Gotcha. And these are kind of, I guess, kind of part of the slam. The goal is like we're trying to restore these cutthroat to like their native areas, right? So that's kind of the point of this too, is you're going to where they were originally found.
Right, and that brings up some of the most common questions we get. And Paul mentioned that they didn't know we had Yellowstones in Utah. Well, old timers remember that we did have Yellowstones in Utah because we had a electric lake that was a brood stock for cutthroat trout. Before these efforts to try to restore native species, people took whatever they could get and raised them, and Yellowstones were it for a long time in Utah. And so people say, oh, well, I just still caught a fish down there in that area, and it's a cutthroat. It must be, well, I guess I'm spacing right now. But it was Yellowstone. They said, well, I'm going to count that as Yellowstone. And I said, well, you can't because that's not its native range. I'm like, what do you mean? And so then it gives us an opportunity to get into the educational part of it, like the drainages. And the biggest one we get, and I knew this was going to happen, is when
Strawberry
people catch
Reservoir.
fish at Strawberry and they say, I caught this amazing, cutthroat at Strawberry. Which one can I cross off the list? And I say, well, that is a beautiful fish, and I've certainly seen a lot of them recently, but you can't count it. And they're like, what do you mean I can't count it? And it's, well, because you're in the Colorado River drainage there, and that's a Bonneville Bear Lake strain cutthroat. And they're like, well, why are they there? And then it gives us another opportunity to talk about biology management and the fact that there's Utah chub in there all the time because anglers insist on fishing with them. They get back in the system, and the Colorados just weren't something that could keep up with them. They didn't evolve with them as much as the Bear Rivers did. So the Bear Rivers are a lot more focused on those as prey, and it's a management tool, and it's worked amazingly well. It's helping control those trash fish populations. Excuse it, I hate to say trash, but that's what people call them.
Right.
And it's given them the chance to control it with the different species and and catch some really big trophy cutthroat, and that's a great thing. But they don't count for the slam.
Sure. And in talking about some of these, native areas that we're trying to target for this slam specifically, are they, like, how intense is it? Are they kind of hard, like you have to hike in to get there miles and miles, or can you, like, drive up if you're wanting to just be lazy and whatever?
You can drive right to some of these streams. You can hike as long as you want as well. I mean, some of these are very remote.
Sure.
But if you wanted just to drive up to the stream and start fishing, you can do it for every one of these fish.
Oh, cool.
So you don't have to hike long distances, and you don't need to necessarily have a 4-wheel drive either. We recommend in some areas, depending on where you're going to go, especially for the Yellowstone cutthroat trout, maybe at least have a pickup with a little clearance, but you don't necessarily even need 4-wheel drive. They're pretty good dirt roads that follow along some of the creeks out there. So those are good questions to ask the biologist when you call them. Try to get information before you go. What kind of vehicle do you plan on using? And then they'll help guide you into the right spots where you won't get in trouble.
Awesome. And we've kind of talked, obviously a big part of the slam is just the opportunity to get outdoors, learn about some of these species, help fund some of the conservation projects. But obviously we all love a good challenge too, right? Which is kind of the point of this. So what is, I guess, the fastest that anybody has done it? Is it, I know you've said some people have finished it in one day.
I know of probably at least a dozen people who've done it in one day.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's a lot more. So yeah, I think, I would, that Paul sounds pretty dang close.
So
I know Adam Eagle from KSL did it
He was
last year, but he was like
he
14
was shy
hours.
on one.
Well, he was, but
his fishing
Yeah.
partner made it. But the second time I did it, it was 8:00 before I got my last fish. So I think
it's a full day.
it is a full day, and somewhere in that 10 hours that I completed the one challenge in probably is about as quick as you can expect to do it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're by yourself, there was 3 of us that day, so we had to wait on our partners to finish on some streams. So you could shave a little time off that. So something to shoot for.
Okay, that's awesome. And I guess the most time consuming part is just probably driving to the different areas.
Yeah.
I think it's over 700 miles.
I wanted to say that when Brett asked it earlier.
I think that's
easy.
about what Adam said his was.
Okay. Oh, that's
depending
crazy.
on where your home base is, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome though. And you guys had mentioned some of your own personal stories. Yeah. What are some other kind of stories you've heard of people doing the slam, or some personal stories that you guys have had? I love the one of you taking your daughter, a beginner, and she does it in 3 days. That's awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't stop her. There was just no stopping at that point. Once we got our second day in, we went up to get our Colorado River, and she caught probably a dozen fish that day. We had a great time, took the dog, and the dog was swimming in all the lakes up there. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm thinking, if we take the dirt road across the north slope of the Uintas, we're going to end up in the Upper Bear. I go, do you want to shoot for a second one today? And she said, oh, absolutely. So we went over, and she got it.
I love it.
So she had 3 fish in 2 days, and I knew what we were doing. The next day we were going to Box Elder, and she caught Yellowstones in 2 different streams out there. So yeah, it's not impossible. It's not hard. It's fun. Gets you into some new country, and that's probably the thing I like the most hearing from people is they just really enjoyed the challenge in seeing new country in Utah. The Yellowstone cutthroat trout, that's the most restricted range in the state with 6 streams. Most people didn't understand we have them, and when they go out there and see how beautiful that country is,
And those fish.
and the fish are just some of the best cutthroat you're ever going to see. They're like, we're going out there again because that was just too much fun. So just hearing those types of stories is really rewarding for me. Just seeing new country and having new experiences, and then also the friendship and the family times. The stories about doing that with friends and family is just fantastic.
That's awesome. And there is Paul wrote up a nice little blog post about his experience taking his daughter to do the slam. So you should check that out if you haven't on the division website. And how about you, Brett? Yeah, just some stories either you've heard from people doing the slam or your own.
Both. I think for me, when we were talking about I guess I could, over the years, I'd always kind of had envisioned in my mind at least where one of the fish I would catch would come from. And even though after the slam launched I caught Colorado somewhere else, I had to get back to that spot because I just knew that's where I wanted that fish to come from. And when I caught that fish, it was really rewarding for me to feel like, okay, I've helped create this slam, and all these people have been so happy. Now it's my turn to kind of. It's a little selfish, but it was really powerful stuff. And I think a lot of people are surprised by the feeling of kind of success that they have from it. It's a little bit more than they think it will be.
Yeah.
It's not just, you realize it's not just about the medallion, and it's not just about the certificate. It's about the experience.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I thought that's what it was going to be about, and I really realized it at that moment. One of my favorite stories is from my friend Heidi Lewis, who, when she went out to complete the slam, she had a bunch of friends from out of state that she decided to take. And the last fish was the Yellowstone. And for some reason, or I can't remember exactly what happened, the rod got locked in a car or broken or something like that.
Oh,
she
no.
loaned her rod to somebody from out of town so they could get their fish. But she decided she wasn't just going to sit there. So she got a stick and she tied some line on it, and she dangled a fly over a hole because it was I mean, you're fishing in some really small water out there, and it's very technical. Paul's the master of the bow and arrow cast.
It's good to have in your toolbox.
It sure is. And so, but she didn't even have a rod to do that with. So she just looked at a spot and saw that there was a little opening, and she dropped that fly down in the hole and caught her Yellowstone.
Stop it.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite stories. And the other thing is I've taken national media on 3 different trips to do the slam. And we've been successful every time, and it's been really rewarding. But there's nothing like, oh my gosh, he finally, we got that fish. We don't need to worry anymore. But and it really does take away that pressure. But there's such a sense of just energy of knowing that you did it. You caught, if one down, 3 to go, and it's
Sure.
really exciting, and it pulls you through. I want to mention that I think some people have a kind of a misnomer about the slam, that it's about fly fishermen and that it's about kind of a different crowd, a different demographic of anglers. There's no rules that it has to be flies. There's bait's allowed where bait is allowed by the state, and the proof is in the pudding. The very first guy who completed the slam, within 2 weeks of it launching, there's a worm hanging out of the mouth of every fish in his pictures.
Well, it was April. Most streams were
Right.
either socked in still with snow, or the fish, when you could get it into a hole, they weren't going to take a fly.
Sure.
Right.
So yeah, he was the first one to accomplish
And
it.
he was leaving the state, and he wanted to get it done before he left. He had a lot more confidence in his bait skills than he did his fly skills, but he told me, I want to come back and do it with flies again. I don't think he has yet, but
Yeah.
and I want to make it clear that that's this is something for every angler in Utah, not a certain group. And Trout Unlimited promotes catch and release. We also promote keep them wet, take good care of the fish. I
Sure.
know we're asking people to take pictures, but there's good ways to do it, especially in times when we're in a drought and the water's low and it's warm. So we need to be aware of how to take care of the fish. They are a sensitive species. That's why part of why the state's doing so much work with them is to try to keep them from being listed on the endangered species list. And it's and we're lucky to be able to fish for all these cutthroat, and they're an amazing fish with a lot of cultural and heritage ties for us. And we're lucky to be able to fish for them.
Totally.
We are. And a little history on that, too, that you just jogged my memory. For Bonneville cutthroat trout and Bear River cutthroat trout, they were thought to be extinct in Utah in the mid-'70s. And a few conservation projects, and then going out and looking at some of these small streams, we were able to restore this fish back into a good part of its range. One of my personal favorites in my career is with the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. When I went out to look for those, we hadn't even been sampling out there for 25 years, and I was trying to find any information I could on where they might be and if we would still have populations, and everybody told me, don't even worry, they're gone. They're not there anymore. And when I went out, I found 6 populations. Some of them were in immediate need of care and conservation, and we jumped into action and got those secure. But yeah, we didn't even know as an agency 25 years ago that 25 years ago that we had this fish still in the state. So they're not the most abundant fish, but practice good conservation, and I like the plug. Just look at the fishing regulations. That's what you really need to follow when you're going to these streams is whatever the state rules and regulations are.
Right. And I love that kind of success story that you guys mentioned, that it can just takes a little bit of effort and conservation and, people to care and really try and to kind of turn things around for a different species. And you guys had kind of touched on this. So if somebody's, obviously you said flies work well with cutthroat, but if somebody's not a fly angler, what are some kind of general tips to have success? You'd mentioned do your research, obviously, kind of do your homework, but just as far as like the fishing itself, what are some kind of good, solid tips, general tips for somebody to be successful catching cutthroat? So
cutthroat aren't the hardest fish to catch. So I would recommend, you can use worms anywhere, and they'll definitely take a worm. And your larger streams, a little spinner of any kind, and they'll take those very readily as well. But even if you're not a fly angler, I would recommend you buy and have a few grasshopper patterns and elk hair caddis, maybe a black ant with you, and do as Brett described. My daughter can't bow and arrow cast. She couldn't cast well enough to get into really any pocket on Johnson Creek, but I have a video of her crawling on her stomach over and dabbing a grasshopper pattern into a hole and immediately having a cutthroat trout take it. So she only had 3 feet of line coming from the end of her fly rod, just got in position and put the fly on the water, and it was instantaneous that a fish took it and she had her fish. So you don't have to be a fly angler, but for some of those small streams, that's probably your most effective technique.
Okay.
Is to dab a fly. Just be very cautious as you're going up to not spook the fish, and then just get that fly in a pool of any kind, and there's probably 3 fish in there, and they're going to fight each other on who's going to get it first.
Awesome.
If you haven't spooked them yet.
And it's
Yeah.
always the little one that wins. What's up with that?
They're good swimmers. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
One thing I'll add to that is that, we've been talking a lot about streams, but you don't have to fish only in streams. There's plenty of places you can catch them in reservoirs and lakes. My first Bear River cutthroat came from Bear Lake. I was trolling on the lake, and I think I caught like a 5-pound cutty. So,
Oh, wow.
it's not just limited to small streams. There's some pretty good possibilities for bigger fish and bigger waters.
Gotcha. And for somebody that wants to, they've been listening to us, they're feeling all inspired, they want to get out. I guess where should they go for more information and to sign up for the slam?
So the Trout Unlimited manages the UtahCutthroatSlam.org webpage. It's got all the information, all the maps, some suggested locations, the phone number for the Northern Division office, so you can call and get information specifically about the Yellowstone and the Raft River Mountains. We've got the pictures of the anglers who've completed the slam, over 700 of them. And some other generic information about some other cutthroat that are in Utah that are not native, which is interesting or kind of mystery. And then we also have social media. We have a Facebook page. We have Twitter and Instagram accounts. And there's a lot of stories that the division and Trout Unlimited have produced over the years about a lot of families that have done the slam together, and they can be found on those locations. One other thing I would just want to point out is that because they are a sensitive species, there's a lot of closures on cutthroat waters and rivers. Not a lot, but enough that you should check before you go out fishing for cutthroat. And it's right now, actually, it's typically like May 15th
Yep.
through.
So again, going to the rules and regulations and looking at the guidebook is the key. But a few cutthroat trout waters are closed to the second Saturday in July. And that's to protect fish, cutthroat trout in spawning areas.
Spawning, yeah. No, that's good.
But there's a lot of them that are open too.
Right.
So really, when runoff comes down, if you're trying to fish a stream, and there's not going to be a lot of runoff this year, so you can go out and probably start catching some of these fish. In fact, I've been catching a few already this spring in the Weber.
Cool. Yeah, no, those are good tips to note. And obviously, we've been talking mostly today about the Utah Cutthroat Slam, kind of educating people on that. If somebody has already done that, or if they want kind of a broader challenge, we also wanted to give a little plug for the Western Native Trout Challenge. And basically, kind of give us an overview of what that entails.
Well, I'll let Paul do it since he's already completed the first level. But
I know he's a master.
I'll say that the opportunity is there to do both at the same time. You can count the same fish for both challenges. So,
Okay.
sign up for both and get out there and do them and get your fish in Utah and then start exploring the rest of the West. It's like I said, it's an opportunity to go fishing, and it's a great excuse. And family who might be reluctant about you being gone every weekend fishing seem to accept it a little bit better when you have a goal like that to complete it. And then when you pull them into it, one of my favorite times fishing was with my father-in-law, my wife, my daughter, and my son, and we all caught our fish, and we've all signed up for the slam, and it's just a fun thing to do, and I got to say that my kids smile a little different when they're holding a fish for the slam.
I love that, and I love the whole if you don't want me to go fishing, just come with me.
Exactly.
Just
well,
make
that's what we should do anyway.
Make them come with you. Yeah.
Right.
So tell us about the states that are involved
Okay.
in the Western.
So Western Native Trout Initiative, if you go to their website, you'll get a link to the challenge, and it has a great website just like the Utah Cutthroat Trout website, and really it is tailored after our Cutthroat Trout Slam. They were trying to get it off the ground for several years, and once they saw the success Utah was having, it wasn't too long before they got it launched. So I think
we
it
helped
launched
them with their medallions and
Yep.
and yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
I think it was launched in 2019, and like the Utah Cutthroat Trout Slam, you need to catch a fish from that point forward. So just register. You can't retroact,
Sure.
previous catches through your life. I could probably be
You can
several.
do that with the Wyoming one.
Can you? Okay. So everyone's different. All the rules are
That's
different.
right.
But this is a challenge partnership between Western Native Trout Initiative, Trout Unlimited, and the 12 Western states. So basically, from the line of New Mexico, Colorado, and Montana west.
Okay.
So there's 12 states that have 21 species of trout and char, and there's 3 levels. It's similar. It's $25 to register, and I think $23 goes into the Winty pot of money, which was developed to get funding for native trout and char conservation in the West. So, as a cutthroat biologist, we've used Western Native Trout Initiative funding for many of our projects on Utah streams as well.
Oh, cool.
So, when you register for this, you're really helping and potentially helping your fish here in Utah, even though you're going across the West to catch these fish. There's 3 levels. The first level, I think you get 6 species in 4 states, and then I think it's 8 species in 12 states, and then 12 species in 18 states.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can catch as many as you want. You could count your 3 in Utah, but you might want to catch a Colorado River in Wyoming, or a Yellowstone in Wyoming, or a Bonneville in Idaho. You're going to want to space them out in order to get those states and the fish. But
Gotcha.
they have great maps where you can and go and find these fish, and where the states will allow you to count the fish. Some states have different rules. Montana has a rule that's just kind of different than everybody else's, to where they can't be involved in something like this with wild fish populations. So the fish that you're going to go to Montana and try to catch are West Slope cutthroat and Yellowstone cutthroat, but they have to be fish that are stocked into flatwaters in those areas. So
Okay.
you do want to look at the website. You want to do some homework, just like we said with the Utah Cutthroat Trout Slam. Great information, though, tells you where to go. Doesn't take long to do the challenge. I mean, I went around last year to Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah, and got my 6 species in just the 4 states, and had the first level already finished. And then you can scheme on how you start trying to pick those fish off in other states. I went to see my mother in Arizona in August this last year during COVID. Drove down because we weren't flying at the time, and it was the hottest week of the summer down there in
course.
Tucson. And I got up at 3:30 in the morning to drive to go fishing, and it was already 85 degrees. And I'm
Oh
like,
my
there is
gosh.
no way there's any fish around. But I did a trip over to New Mexico and caught a Gila trout, and then on my way home back to Utah, I stopped in the White Mountains and caught an Apache trout. So two more fish in 2 states, and I'm on my way to the second level of the challenge. But you can easily just kind of plan already existing trips, or take the family on a vacation somewhere they haven't been, but you might want to go to catch one of these fish. So that's another good technique to use.
Dang, I have to go to Alaska.
Right.
Right. I know. I love all the strategy going on into this. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, speaking of planning, I've been helping a guy that's the Trout Unlimited, Orvis, Winty, and Montana Fly Company are sponsoring on an adventure to try to do the Winty Challenge this summer. He is I asked him how many hours he spent planning it. He doesn't even know. It's off the charts. But he's very meticulous. He's contacted biologists everywhere and TU staff to help talk about conservation as well. As he's going to be doing this, he'll be providing a series of stories for Trout Unlimited that we'll be posting on our national website and social media about the different fish that he's going to try to catch. And he doesn't even say try to catch. He's just, I'm catching them.
I love it.
He's 3 in already. He's doing well, and it's pretty exciting to live vicariously through him as he's planning these trips. It's he's determined he's going to get 20 of the species. I think one of them is off limits right now, one of the New Mexico ones, and but that changes. So it's going to be interesting to watch him as he tries to do this year. And again, it's for us, it's an opportunity to talk about the different species in the West and the role they play in their areas and the traditional roles they've played through centuries. So it's really interesting to be able to see the country through. I call it cutthroat country. And for me, I don't see, when I pass, I drove over Wolf Creek Pass a couple of years ago, right after we launched the Slam, and I realized as I was driving over the pass that I was leaving Bonneville country and I was heading into Colorado River, and it struck me, I'm a cutthroat geek. It's like, oh my gosh,
You are. I'll vouch for you.
Nobody would think in those terms but you. Yeah.
It's true, and but it's cool for me to, when I think about a map, I visualize it by drainage now, and I think about the fish that are native to that area.
That's awesome.
It's fun.
You are a nerd. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
No. Well, this was great, you guys. Thanks for coming on and kind of taking a minute to explain this initiative and more about these fish species. I'm feeling very inspired. I'm like, I need to go sign up for the Slam and take my kids, and yeah.
Well, we like to think that, even if you don't fish, you're supporting wildlife.
Totally.
By promoting this program and doing it. And even if you don't think you're going to ever be able to catch all the fish or not, you never know when you might be somewhere where you might end up being able to catch one. And if you're registered, it's $20.
Sure.
Just
Right.
do it now and have it in your wallet,
Right.
or on your app.
Doesn't expire, so you can do it at your own pace.
Yeah.
I love it. Hopefully next time you guys talk to me, I'll have my framed medallions, like I can put in my office, like
Yep.
Paul. Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much for, again, like I said, coming on and talking about this. It's a super cool program, and hopefully our listeners are also feeling inspired to check this out and try for that Slam. And as always, we'd ask those listening if you would subscribe to the Wild Podcast. We release a new episode on the third Tuesday of the month, and we hope that you will join us next month for some more wildlife stories.